I've reached a point in my life where I'm ready to share the story that's been weighing on my mind for the last 35 years. For obvious reasons, I'm going to exclude the details that could reveal my identity or the location of the anomaly. I'm a seismologist, and I've been working for various government agencies since I graduated college in 1985. Because of the sometimes sensitive nature of the projects, I've held a top-level security clearance for the last 2 decades. At the time of the story, our department had been receiving a high number of calls from a remote area a few states over. The area consisted mostly of farmland and wasn't highly populated, but the reports were similar enough to finally get my team's attention. The residents of the town had all been reporting a slight constant hum or vibration radiating from the ground. Now, we do have technology to detect this kind of thing, and indeed, we were getting readings from the area in question. The strange thing, though, was the signatures were so subtle that the people in the town shouldn't have been able to notice them. The truth is, we identify seismic activity frequently in various areas of the country. It's a normal occurrence and usually doesn't warrant any investigation. This, however, was clearly different. Anyway, the request for an investigation and resolution came down the pipeline, so I put together a team consisting of myself and a junior official working under me. For the purpose of this story, I'll just call him Nick. The next day, we were on a plane and headed to the location. We started the investigation in the area where we had the highest amount of calls come in. Now, this may not sound super scientific to most of you, but our first test was to simply get out of the car, stand still, and see if we could feel the hum. We checked that box immediately. We both noticed it right away. Indeed, it was subtle, but definitely present. At the time, I brushed it off, but I did notice something else. The air was crisp, the clouds dark, and there was almost no wind whatsoever. It felt very similar to the beginning of a storm, that calm, quiet sense. Again, at the time, I didn't associate it with our investigation. Next, we conducted interviews with residents of the nearby town. We simply canvassed the streets, told them we were studying seismic activity in the area, and asked them if they'd be willing to answer a few questions. Things started to get a bit strange from this point. Because it was an old farming town, it seemed like the average age was around 60 years old, and they'd all been living there for generations. Almost 95% of the people we interviewed told us the vibration had always been present. However, before it was inconsistent and lower in intensity. Like I said, our sensors detected no change, but they all said the same thing, so they couldn't have been making it up. I authorized additional resources and pushed the investigation forward. I contacted my team back home, relayed our findings, and had them run satellite and sensor data through our analysis software, designed to isolate subsonic anomalies with pinpoint accuracy. Just an hour later, we had it. The source had been triangulated to a wooded area roughly 15 miles outside of the town. We headed back to the hotel, packed up, and started driving out toward the coordinates. Eventually, the road couldn't take us any further, so we parked and headed in on foot. Now, the forest in this area was pretty dense, but not unmanageable. What made it slightly worse was the moisture. The elevation was low, forcing us to maneuver around a few swampy areas. I kept an eye on the handheld GPS as we approached the location. Now, I'm not someone who typically feels nervous, especially at work. Dating, that's another story. But seriously, I'm an analytical person, not an emotional one. Science is my world, and it's been that way my entire life. The number of times I've come across something I couldn't explain on a project, I could count on one hand. And even those times, I always had strong hypotheses. But this would be the first time I didn't have any explanation, and the first time I felt slightly out of my element. Eventually, the GPS hit 0, which meant we were standing directly on the location. I checked my watch so I could mark down our time of arrival, but it wasn't working. The minute and the hour hand had completely frozen, and the second hand was slowed down to a fraction of what it should be. I yelled at Nick to give me the time. I looked over at him as he checked his watch. He stared at it for a few seconds, tapped the face with his finger, and then pulled out his phone to get the time from there. 14:45, he said. I paused for a second. I had to at least humor myself. Hey Nick, is your watch dead? Just about, he said. The second hand is barely moving. It was strange, both of our watches dying at the exact same time. I almost felt ridiculous doing what I did next, but the truth is there are departments out there that study gravity anomalies, time distortions, and other unexplained phenomenon. Over the years, I'd heard whispers from colleagues, vague mentions, nothing concrete. They were never really on my radar, but still, something felt off. I held my watch in front of my face and slowly began walking backwards, retracing my path the way we came in. Suddenly, the second hand ticked once, then again. Within seconds, the entire watch was working normally. I stepped forward, it stopped, back again, and ticking. Maybe electromagnetic interference or an unusual magnetic field. I was fascinated. I shouted to Nick, told him to try the same thing. He did, and sure enough, the moment he reached the same distance from the center, he stopped and called out, "Working again." I was excited. In my job, things got a bit repetitive, and in the rare cases we actually have to mobilize to investigate something like this, the case turns out to be easily explainable. But this I hadn't seen. I ran through explanations in my mind. Geology, land formation, elemental factors maybe. But the more I thought, the more I scratched my head. I mean, our watches were behaving the same way, starting and stopping at the exact same time, at the same distance. It was precise and something I wouldn't have expected from a natural magnetic force. Suddenly, I hear Nick yelling to me. I look over and he's pointing up at something. I followed his finger, expecting to see something in the trees, or maybe a plane in the sky. But then I noticed it. A sparse flock of blackbirds passing above us, except they were behaving strange. I watched a bird change its course out of nowhere, suddenly, as if avoiding an invisible wall. The next three did the same thing. We watched each and every one, avoiding the airspace above the site. Then I had a thought. I knelt down and started sifting through the soil, and the strangeness only continued. No insects. Nothing. Not a single earthworm, beetle, centipede. Not only were mammals avoiding this place, even the bugs were. I wondered if even microorganisms would be found in a dirt sample. It became clear to me almost immediately after that whatever was happening here was something I'd never seen. For the first time in decades, I felt I was in over my head, and that wasn't an easy thing for me to admit to myself. Unusual as it was, we do have protocols for this kind of situation, for anomalies, so I made the call. I briefed my office on what we had found and asked them to relay the information to an agency we occasionally coordinate with. Again, I can't give you the name of that agency. Within 3 hours, the cavalry showed up, and their response was more dramatic than I expected. The agency I initially thought would handle the situation was joined by another 3-letter crew. One I was less familiar with, but it's still well known to most government employees, even civilians. Think female deer. In total, I'd estimate about a dozen officials on site. A few of them immediately began circling the area with handheld equipment I didn't recognize. Another group started sectioning off a wide perimeter with yellow tape. No hesitation, no discussion. Then a commander, someone I'd worked with a few times in the past, approached me directly. "We'll need you to stay on site to help analyze some data," he said. Then he glanced over at Nick and added, "But I'm going to need you to send your guy home." I just nodded. These guys don't show up for no reason, and from the way they moved, the tools they brought, and the tone in the commander's voice, I could tell they already knew more than I did. Of course, I asked the commander for more information, but he was vague. Just said, "We think something might be making its way to the surface." Obviously an incredibly weird cryptic message. I had no clue what he meant by that, but I could tell he wasn't in the mood for a Q&A. At this point, the strangeness escalated. Crew members from the other team had drones in the air taking video of the sectioned off area, but the time on the live video feed was slowed way down. The video showed the agents inside the caution tape moving at 1/10 the speed of everyone outside of it, as if they were in slow motion. But it didn't end there. Several crew members that were walking the perimeter with sensors started arguing with members inside of the sectioned off area about tests they were supposed to complete. Everyone inside the area insisted they had already performed the tests, but the people outside insisted they hadn't. The commander looked concerned as I followed him to the makeshift control station they had set up to review the data and drone footage. It didn't show anyone performing those tests, not inside or outside of the sectioned off area. However, in their software, the data from the supposed tests had somehow been inputted. Next, the digging started, and it didn't take long before they hit something. Everyone outside of the tape gathered around to watch the 4-person crew in white biosuits uncover the surface of this thing. They were careful not to stand directly on it. It was obvious at this point that the vibration this thing was emitting had gotten significantly stronger since it had been uncovered. It was metallic, reflective almost. Because of the exposed convex surface, it appeared to be a sphere that was still 99% buried. Based on its curvature, we estimated the radius to be approximately 400 feet. I remember their crew regrouping, the commander making a few calls, speaking low and fast. Although I'd never encountered anything quite like this before, I knew from past projects that information on sensitive operations is always tightly controlled. Because of that, I wasn't surprised to be left out of the finer details. Still, what I did hear caught me off guard. The language being thrown around wasn't technical, it was theoretical, experimental. Words I never expected to hear spoken seriously on a live site. Things like gravity manipulation, temporal distortion, and strangest of all, dimensional interference. But what happened next has been burned into my mind ever since. After a tense discussion between a few higher-ups on their team, one of the men in a white suit broke off and walked calmly to the edge of the zone. Then, he ducked under the yellow tape and stepped directly onto the object. Everyone went silent. He knelt down, pulled out some kind of scanning device and held it close to the surface. At first, he moved slowly, carefully, I assumed. But then his movement got even slower, unnaturally so. He stood up, stiff and sluggish, turned toward us, and tried to yell something. But his voice didn't sound right. It came out distorted, like audio slowed down to half speed, then to a quarter speed. Seconds later, both his body and his voice froze completely. And when I say froze, I mean literally. His voice stopped mid-sentence, a drawn-out, garbled sound, and just hung in the air, glitching, echoing, still present but detached from him. It lingered in the air for almost 10 minutes and gradually faded into silence. No one said a word, we just stood there, stunned, horrified, confused. Then, still frozen in place like a statue, he tipped over and fell onto the object. When he hit, the sound was wrong. Not flesh and fabric, but stone almost. He bounced off, motionless. And that's when we knew he wasn't unconscious, and he wasn't paralyzed. He had become stone, I guess. The proof was clear. The arm that had been holding the scanner snapped off on impact, sliding around loosely inside his suit. Almost immediately after it happened, the commander walked over to me and a few other guys from the original team. His tone was flat and controlled, but urgent. We need you to leave now. Still in shock, I didn't argue, just nodded and followed orders. Deep down, I understood. Whatever this was, it was way above my clearance. Something I was never meant to witness. Not long after, I heard the site had been converted into a test facility run by one of the agencies that showed up that day. They built a full compound around it, I assumed to study it, contain it, and most of all, keep it hidden. I try not to think about that day too often. My mind still struggles to process what I saw, as well as the questions it raises about reality, about time, about our universe. These questions are almost too big to carry. Hey everyone, I really hope you enjoyed this video. I wanted to thank everyone for watching, especially for supporting such a small channel. I really appreciate each and every one of you. If you are enjoying the content and you want to see more, please consider leaving a like on this video and subscribing to the channel. It means so much to me. Cheers.